The national debt is the total amount of money the government has borrowed and still owes. The government borrows money to pay for spending which is beyond the revenue the government has collected in taxes, fees, and other sources. There are two general categories of government borrowing: budget deficits and off-budget debt. A deficit is the money that is borrowed to pay for budgeted expenditures for a given year for which there is no revenue. The deficit is added to the total amount of money that the government owes, the national debt. Sometimes expenses are not included in the budget process, but are approved through supplemental appropriations. If the government does not have sufficient revenue to pay for the supplemental expenditures, the money must be borrowed. This off-budget borrowing also adds to the national debt. The national debt is, therefore, the accumulation of budget deficits and off-budget borrowing. For example, if in 3 successive years the government had 3 budget deficits, then the total of all 3 deficits would be added to the national debt. If there were supplemental off-budget appropriations during this time, the money to pay for these expenses would also be added to the debt. This happened during the George W. Bush administration. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were not funded through the normal budget process. Rather, the money for these wars was approved in supplemental off-budget appropriations. While the Bush administration budget deficits of 2002 through 2008 added $2,134 billion to the national debt, the debt actually increased by $4,216 billion during that time because there was $2,082 billion in off-budget spending. Surpluses are the opposite of deficits. Government revenue exceeds government expenditures. However, surpluses are not automatically used to reduce the national debt. Congress must authorize this action and may use the money for other purposes. For example, President Bush and the majority in Congress used the surpluses of 1998 through 2001 as justification for tax cuts, rather than to pay down the debt. Attempts to reduce the deficit do not reduce the national debt. Deficit reduction simply means that the national debt increases more slowly. The national debt would neither increase nor decrease if there were balanced budgets and no unfunded off-budget spending. The national debt was just over $260 billion after World War II. However, because there have been few attempts to pay down the debt, but many budget deficits and unfunded off-budget expenditures, the debt has grown. By 2009, the national debt was almost $11,876 billion.